Dear Martin Zoller, we're so happy to have you here with us today as an expert in the Heal Revolution conference. And first of all, we would like you to introduce yourself, tell us about your biography, who you are, and what you're doing. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you that I'm able to be part of your conference. The topic is very important and interesting because healing is the key to the holistic being, and without healing, we don't have the opportunity to connect with our higher self or our real self. I love to work with media. That means I work with people in seminars, lectures, 101, my books, my CDs, TV projects, to help people to find themselves through holistic healing. My specialty is the aura, reading energy fields of people, projects, objects, to see where something is coming from and in which direction something or somebody is developing. I was born with this gift, and I was able to develop it in all sorts of areas for a longer period of time. For almost a year, I was in India, and in ashrams and monasteries, I learned to deal with mediality and intuition. And of course, I had many mentors, physical people, and also light beings that helped me how to use this gift and this power. And I'm doing this for about 25 years now, exactly 25 years, worldwide. Middle East, Europe, Africa, South America, Central America, United States. Depending on where I have the feeling that I can do something, that I can help people to walk the path of the soul of one's own self. And I have a question. You landed in Panama, part-time, as I understood. And you talked about locations and about energy, auras, and we're interested why. Why Panama? Why Panama and Switzerland? What's the reason for that? There's no reason for Panama and Switzerland because since 25 years ago I'm not living in Switzerland anymore. Okay, not at all. When I left at the age of 20, I was in South America in different countries. I worked in Colombia. For many years I was in Bolivia. I lived there. Then I was in the Middle East. I lived in 2-3 different countries. Also worked there. Also Central Asia, Afghanistan, Iraq during the last years. And since 1.5 years ago, or 1 year in Panama. And there's a reason, because energetically Panama is a very stable country, has a lot of nature, is very powerful through all that nature. And my wife and I really like the country because it's well balanced between Western culture, tradition, and the South American culture. The origin, you can feel this power, this magic over here very well. And it's true, every year, 2-3 times, sometimes just 1 time, I'm coming back to Switzerland, generally to Europe to give courses over there, mostly in Switzerland, Germany and Austria. It's well balanced between those 3 countries. But to regenerate, and we're talking about energy and healing, to regenerate, for me it's clearly more possible in South America. being South America or Central America, because there's so much more nature, the energy is closer to the origin, native, the culture is more relaxed than, for example, in Europe or in the United States or in the Middle East. The regeneration possibilities for body and mind are a lot better than in Europe. Okay. And then we have another question. How? So you're accompanying people through healing or help them that they're able to heal themselves. And could you explain us on one example how it works, what happens, what you're seeing? So for people that haven't seen that much from this reality, so they get a little bit of a feeling or a concrete feeling what you're doing. Okay, throughout the aura, I can look into the soul of the people. You can picture it as if I would look into the body and I can see what the person is on the inside, his essence. Every one of us comes here with a life task or is born with a talent or a gift. And this life task that corresponds with our talent is the actual reason why we're here. It's similar to nature. Every plant, every insect, every animal has a specific reason, a specific task in the cycle of life, of holistic being. And every one of those animals, of those plants, knows exactly, consciously or unconsciously, which task it should do. Only we as human beings have certain problems with it, which is actually part of our free will. Meaning, throughout the free will, we have the possibility to follow what we are and what our talent or gift is, or not. In different cultures, people live with their talent very harmonically, in other cultures less. And we Western people belong to the cultures that are less connected to the godly. And the way I practice healing with people throughout reading them, throughout their aura or their soul, diving into their soul, I'm demonstrating the people where their talents are, how they can get in touch with them, how they can express them to live their life in a more holistic, harmonic, and conscious way. Concretely, this can mean that I point out to somebody where his talent and potential lays, which professional changes could be done. Then there are many people that are already on their path. In this case, I'm able to see what can still be done to intensify the path, to make it stronger, how to express it. And of course, I can give hints concerning professional decisions. Is a relationship working? Should I invest or not? Is this part of my path or not? Of course, I also work with private topics. If I, for example, work with a couple where we see there are certain problems, then I can help to solve the problems, even though problem solving doesn't necessarily mean that they both live together in harmony afterwards. If a separation is happening afterwards, then it's the path that the two people have to walk so that the holistic path can be walked again. Healing in this matter doesn't necessarily mean harmony. Sometimes healing can also mean conflict. Healing can mean sadness. Difficulties can arise from it. It's comparable to, for example, a doctor's visit. If we have a bigger injury and we go to the doctor, to the hospital, the doctor is going to tell us, or the naturopathic doctor or the shaman, and he tells us that to heal the entire body, the left arm has to be amputated. Of course, an amputation is very painful, but if through this amputation the rest of the body can be saved, it's a pain and it's a procedure that has to be done. And it's the same with the individual. Sometimes we have to make mental and spiritual sacrifices, or we have to let something go. We have to allow change that can be painful or sad to find our path back to wholeness. And the same thing happens collectively. It's not different there. People in the audience of the Congress that know my website, they know that one of my specialties is making prognosis of the future, prophecies concerning social, political, and economical topics. And there you can see processes and developments that are not just for the individual, but collectively. And there's obvious that a society has to go through certain change, even if they're not as harmonic and simple, but later they will lead back to harmony. So for me, healing is a very broad aspect. It has an impact on many emotions, not just the good. There's also the difficult, and in my opinion, it's also part of holistic healing, as I've said in the example with the amputation. Yes, that's very interesting because you said you're looking into the soul. What is the soul for you? What is the soul for you? And then there's the topic multi-dimensionality of the soul. Is that something that talks to you? I'm just asking the question, and you can think about what you want to add. We are moving multi-dimensionally. That means you can picture it like a hologram. We're moving not just three-dimensionally, going from A to B in a fixed time and space. We have the opportunity, comparable to a horoscope, to move multi-dimensionally, multi-layered. That means, for example, that through reading auras, astral projection, going back into past lives, throughout future analysis, we can go into the future. In astral projections, we can make contact with people that have died. We can visit guardian angels and aliens. We can make connections with realities and other time and space dimensions. Our soul is very versatile. There are almost no limits. We create the limits in our head, but they don't exist in the intuition or the higher self. The soul, I would say, you could compare it to an onion. The soul would be the entire onion, which means the soul is everywhere, in every single layer of the onion. The soul is in every atom, no matter in which vibration this body exists. The soul exists in the third dimension, in the emotional body, in the spiritual body, in the astral body, in the mental body. Our soul is everywhere. The soul goes back to the divine original knowledge, even where space and time doesn't exist anymore, and everything is just one. Even there exists our soul. And throughout mediality, thanks to mediality, or divination, or strongly developed intuition that actually many people have, and that you can actually learn, we have the opportunity to look into the soul of people. So we don't just see how somebody is dressed, how does somebody look physically, but you can see what is the essence of that person on the inside. Where are certain powers, certain weaknesses, what can be improved, how can uncertainties, for example, be solved. And this is a very important aspect concerning healing, that everybody feels that he's not just a three-dimensional being, but a multidimensional being. And if we mentally understand this, we already get closer in the process of holistic healing. Because the faster we understand that we're not existing just three-dimensionally, the easier and faster holistic healing will be possible. It will be easier to walk the own path. And I would be interested how you could do this concretely. You're talking about the soul plan that everybody has, and it has a lot to do with healing. Would you like to talk about that? Yes, to live the soul plan means to bring the basic talents that we're born with into society. No matter what those basic talents are, they can be moral from the Western understanding or not. They can be ethically acceptable or not. The godly or divine doesn't adapt our moral and ethical principles, and especially not from the Western world because they're wrong. And that's where many people are limiting themselves, especially in Middle Europe, because they think that the path of the divine only means love and harmony, and that's not true. Because the divine is like a rainbow with all sorts of colors and all sorts of aspects of existence. Important is that when you're walking the path of healing, you're walking your path, not the path of religion or philosophy or so-called spiritual values, but your own path. And if your own path means striving against the stream, if the own path means to not be conform, then you shouldn't be conform anymore. But you should drift where you have the feeling that it works and that you are walking the right path. I find it arrogant when people claim that only this or that is good. It means this is right and this is wrong. This is good and this is bad. You're allowed to do this, but not that. It doesn't have anything to do with a holistic understanding, and definitely not with spirituality. If I live by a certain religious dogma, it means maybe I'm gonna get rid of one religion just to dive into another, and then you haven't learned anything. Real diving into the path of the soul means to be true to yourself, to nobody else, but to your own soul. And it's very interesting because it doesn't lead to total anarchy. It leads back to original harmony. We're living in an unharmonic society, and breaking out towards holistic healing might mean short-term anarchy, also maybe short-term egoism. In the longer perspective, it doesn't work. But for that, you can find a new harmonic, holistic society that you can integrate in. Maybe it doesn't go with what we've learned in school, and maybe you will end up in Panama, Paraguay, or in Bavaria, or in Switzerland. You can find this everywhere. It doesn't really depend on geography, but you will find people and think, wow, I'm home here, and here it works for me. What I'm also hearing is that there's different life models that don't exist yet, but that you start creating yourself because you feel it feels good, and you don't really know where it leads to. Exactly. In the end, we never know, and it's trusting the divine, executing what you're feeling inside yourself, even though you don't understand the entire plan. A few years ago, I was in Milan. I was visiting the cathedral. I was part of a guided tour, and the tourist guide told us that this cathedral had been built over generations. And it was very fascinating for me to imagine how craftsmen are working on one altar or building up the walls of the church from which they knew that they were never gonna be able to see them finished. But still, they gave their best. They tried to carve the greatest altar, to build the best walls for the church, even though they knew we will never see how the cathedral will look when it's finished. And it's a great image of how we can imagine this godly divine existence. Somehow we're building a cathedral. We don't know when it's going to be finished, how it's going to look when it's finished, and it's not really important. What is important is that we know that we're building the altar or the wall we're working on as good and as strong as possible. No matter if in the end it's going to be a wall for a cathedral or a castle or a fortress, no matter. The only thing that matters is that we do the things we do as good as possible. And Martin, you talked about the topic multi-dimensionality. You talked about being in contact with guardian angels, with aliens, and I would like to ask you specifically on the topic of dreams. Because many people are waking up, and many people experience in dreams or in meditation, or everybody probably has their own way, but it's one possibility to get closer to the soul plan. What is your experience with it? What is your experience? What are dreams for you? What is happening? I use dreams consciously to receive information from my higher self. For me, I have also developed meditations to concentrate the higher self on a certain topic. So if I'm looking for an answer, I can ask my higher self before going to bed to give me the answers in my dreams. Another possibility is to meditate after waking up and to feel what kind of dreams did I have and to bring those images back into memory. And in the next step, to interpret them. And I do this every morning when I dream. When I wake up, I'm getting the images of my dreams back into my consciousness and I'm meditating with them to understand what they want to tell me for my life, what I can learn from them. And maybe it's a very helpful hint. And what helps to remember the dreams is if you wake up in the morning, you don't open your eyes right away and check the cell phone and WhatsApp messages or the newspaper, but that you consciously keep the eyes closed. And in this state, in this world between waking up and opening the eyes, try to stay there to remember your dreams. You can probably imagine it like this. In the dream world, we're living in another dimension than here. And when we're opening our eyes, we're dying in the other dimension. And we can delay dying by not opening the eyes right away after waking up. And in this in-between space, we can get back the images, we can remember the dreams. And what also can help is a dictaphone. You can put it next to your bed and you can record your dreams. You can make notes and then you can interpret the dreams afterwards. Of course, there are dreams that are more meaningful. There are dreams where you're just processing the previous day that are not necessarily telling you something important. Maybe it's more about digesting unprocessed emotions. And then there are dreams that want to send us an important message. And there are dreams that can be visionary, that you dream something about the family, about friends, the father, or even the country you're living in. Dreams are not just foam, but they're clear hints from the higher self, from mental spheres to help us. I have a question to that, because not all dreams are always comfortable. How can you start interpreting them so that it's easier to deal with them even if they're not comfortable? Yes, it's the same topic as before when we talked about healing, that it's not just about love and harmony, but that all aspects are included in holistic healing. Concerning the dreams, it can be uncomfortable dreams or nightmares. And in those cases, it's important that you also meditate with those dreams. What do they mean to me? Of course, I sometimes have dreams that are not comfortable, but I also dive deeply into them and I ask myself what they mean. Is there fear, prejudice? Are those dreams making me aware of something? Are they warning me? It's very important to also take a look there and not just to run away from it. Looking at the entire being. And I keep on repeating this. It's so important to think in a holistic way and work in a holistic way, especially if you want to get to know your essence. And our essential being is not just harmony, it also has dark sides, also shadow sides. And we can understand it if we're not afraid of the dark aspects. I think this is a very important point, not to be afraid, to just try to understand it. Exactly. And this is important. Not being afraid doesn't mean to ignore it. Even if in the Western world, Middle Europe, I'm always taking this as an example, especially in Middle Europe, we have a tendency to ignore the dark aspects. Many people say, I don't believe in them, so they don't exist. And this is very naive. I wrote about it in my books. If somebody's walking through the Sahara and says, I don't believe in lions and hyenas, so I don't have to protect myself. I'm just gonna keep on walking very comfortably, and it will be the first meal for the lions and the hyenas. But the person walking through the Sahara saying, I know there are those animals, so I'm not gonna leave my car. He sees the animals, he's getting very close to them, he can communicate with them without him or the animals being in danger. And it's the same with all aspects, mentally and spiritually. That's why it's important to look at all aspects, be open for all aspects, not be afraid of those things. And if you're not afraid, you're able to transform them. Then your own perception is changing. And we all know that. Maybe we're afraid of the depth of the ocean. Maybe we're afraid of swimming. We're not so familiar with the ocean. It's bad, there's sharks in there. And if we're letting go of that fear, we're going diving. We're diving with sharks. It doesn't mean that the sharks are less dangerous, but we know we're going diving in a cage. We're not getting too close to each other, but we can learn from each other. I would be interested, because you're in so many different countries, what are the differences? Are there differences in the United States, in England? Is there something different than in Switzerland? Do you know about that? Or at the places where you're often at? Of course, everywhere it's very different. In the Middle East, in Central Asia, in Central Europe, everywhere it's different. I was holding courses in Spain, in northern Germany. It's very different. I find it very interesting to visit different religions and cultures, and it's learning. I'm always learning. And a very important aspect of learning is knowing which differences exist in those countries. I talked about the example Iraq or Afghanistan. A few years ago, I was in Baghdad, in Babylon. During the war, I was in Iraq. And of course, I prepared myself. I gave courses. And of course, I was reading about how it was at the time in these countries. What do I have to pay attention to? You can use the same words for another topic. And if I'm coming to new places like these, I'm asking my mental guides, how should I present myself? Which topics are important there? Especially if I'm coming to places I've never been to. Especially then, I'm contacting the spiritual world and I'm asking the guys up there what is important because they know. What a wonderful thought that no matter where you are, and needs support, that you can do it there. Exactly. Healing is possible everywhere, and the exciting part is you're always learning. That's why I like to travel, because on those travels, I'm not always lecturing and giving seminars. I'm not just working with companies and politicians. I'm also learning on those journeys. I'm visiting new cities, I'm talking to people, especially about the topic healing, also psychology, mediality, divination. If I'm coming to such places, I also look for those people. I find it so interesting. How does a healer work in Afghanistan? How does a healer work in Nigeria? How does mediality work in the jungle? And so on, in Ecuador or Colombia. And to see how those healers, shamans, and medics, how do they work? It's very fascinating. And when I see something that interests me personally, of course I try it. I sit down. How does it work if I do it? What can I learn from that? How can I integrate it into my work? It's a constant development. You're never done learning. Every day is like a present where you can learn something new. And for me, a day is perfect if I can look back and say, you've learned this and that. And as a question, I think it's important because you're in possession of abilities to see things before they happen. What is healing revolution for you? Or how is healing gonna happen in the future for you? I hope in a holistic way. I hope that we're gonna learn that we're multi-dimensional beings, that we don't just work three-dimensionally. And if we observe in the last 15 years the topic healing, intuition, mediality, divination, power psychology, if you observe how this has been growing and how it's accepted more and more, I'm very positive that it's going to become more holistic and integrated. Even in conservative newspapers, the Zurich newspaper or the newspaper Spiegel or the Focus magazine in Switzerland, even they are publishing articles about alternative medicine, healing, stress reduction through meditation, yoga, the power of intuition. They write about it as naturally as they write about football and Thai cuisine. So I have the feeling that we're going into a good direction, even if the path will not just be simple. I still have the feeling that the result will be even better. Thank you, Martin. And you've opened so many doors to different topics. And if you could say in a few words, what is the quintessence of everything you've been saying to the topic of healing? The healing revolution. The quintessence of the topic healing. I would say the quintessence is that every human being feels that he's not walking through life with just his 2 feet, but that he exists in a versatile, multi-layered and multi-dimensional way, and that he's not just moving forward, but also backwards, left, right, up, down. It's very important to be in touch with the inner voice, with the inner self, to feel what is it telling me, and that you take this aspect as the most important aspect to act. And adding on to that, especially when you're starting to learn more about intuition and holistic healing, it can happen that you make mistakes. So there's the feeling something is intuition, you're following it, and you're falling on your nose. And you realize, oh, this wasn't so right. It's like learning a foreign language. It means the two of you know many languages, and probably a lot of people in the audience as well. We know that it's not simple to learn a foreign language. We're making mistakes in the beginning. We start with a few words, then we're learning phrases, verbs, conjugating verbs, then we learn the tense, past, future, present. And until we're able to speak a language more or less well, it takes time. With holistic healing, it takes time. With the language of intuition, it also takes time. I'm inviting you to be patient, especially the people in the audience. For them, this is something totally new. I like to say, and I'm convinced that it's that way, the intuition is never wrong. The intuition, the voice of the higher self, is never wrong. We human beings make mistakes with the interpretation, with the analysis. Our head and our heart can be traps for the pure intuition in the beginning, because emotional and mental prejudice about what our intuition can tell us or can't tell us can have an influence on it. But if we learn to listen to our intuition without having our heart or our head influence it too much, then soon we're going to be able to reduce mistakes more and more until our intuition is so clear that we can see it, perceive it as if we were perceiving a bird or a tree. Thank you, Martin. Thank you so much. Thanks to the two of you for the organization of this Congress. And thank you to the audience for the time that you're sitting here with us and that we're able to have those moments together. Thank you.